Good morning, and welcome to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I am located at 1563 Main Street in Peckville, and I am here every Sunday from 8 to 9 on these stations to bring you, the landowner, valuable information that you need regarding natural gas development here in Pennsylvania. So if you're looking for the show for the landowner, then this is the radio show for you. Again, at the Clark Law Firm, as you probably know, I only represent landowners, oil and gas right owners. I will not represent pipeline or gas companies. At the Clark Law Firm, my focus is solely, again, landowner representation, oil and gas leases, oil and gas lease amendments, working on three different amendment projects right now, representing clients. So very interesting. Been able to really negotiate. In one case, there's negotiated a very nice payment for the landowner to amend or modify their existing lease. Very specific. You got to look at specific cases, your specific facts. But when you're presented, if you are with a lease amendment, a request by a company to amend or modify your lease, you should be speaking to an attorney to represent you, to explain to you what it is, to give you your options. I know sometimes people say, well, geez, that's pretty self-serving. Here's the attorney saying get an attorney. It's important. The one gentleman I was working with, he went from, literally he increased the offer by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Very rare, absolutely does not happen all the time, and I would say certainly is not even common. But it does on occasion, and it can happen. So what we need to do is make sure that if you're one of those cases, that we're maximizing your situation. You hear me say that a lot. We want to maximize compensation. We want to maximize the limitations that we can obtain from the company. We need to do that in every agreement. So look, in most cases, are you going to get an increase of several hundreds of thousands of dollars on an amendment? Well, most likely not. Absolutely, most likely not. But in some cases, it may be possible. In other cases, maybe you get benefits of tens of thousands of dollars. Maybe you're able to minimize what the company is asking for as far as an amendment to your lease. So if they want to extend a certain provision to allow them, say, for example, 5 to 10 more years before they have to drill any more wells. And, if you're faced with this may make some sense to you. But we see companies, they want to amend leases that have these requirements that the company has to drill more wells within a certain time frame. So if you have a lease and the company says in your lease, and these are the real strong leases, where it says something like, hey, the company has to drill 2 more wells within 5 years from now, maybe even 3 years from now, company comes to you, says, hey, we'd like to amend this. We'd like to give ourselves more time. Instead of having to drill 2 more wells within 3 years, we'd like to push it back 10 years. Well, most people aren't going to find that as an attractive offer. So, in most cases, certainly it is not an attractive offer, especially if you're older. Do you want to sit there and wait 10 more years to see what's going to develop? So generally speaking, that's not something that is going to be very favorably received by the landowner. However, maybe you can negotiate cash payment for signing any amendment. Maybe you can, instead of 5 to 10 years, maybe you can limit it to 3 years. Maybe it's from 10, you can go down to 5. And then maybe that payment that you may be able to negotiate is going to justify that extension. Then you also have to watch, you got to watch, because there's a domino effect many times when you're dealing with lease extensions, for example here, but other documents too. What I mean by that is, if you grant a lease extension, say, to allow additional time to drill, well, you got to make sure you also understand, how does the shut-in provision of your lease work? So if you're giving them 3 or 5 more years, or possibly, and please, I hope you're not, giving 10 more years, that means you're giving the company 5 years, we'll say, but they also have this shut-in provision, which would allow them, even after the 5 years, to cap the wells or shut them in not produce gas, in which case you as a landowner are not going to receive royalties. So we need to understand, you need to understand, what does your shut-in language say? So if you give them 5 years, can they shut the well in after 5 years, or the wells for, say, an additional 5 years? So now you're up to 10. So you got to be careful. You have to look at the totality of what you're dealing with. And where are you going to get that? Where are you going to get that understanding? From the company landman who's out there to get you to sign, to give the company as much flexibility as possible. Well, I don't think you are. I think that landman is going to do what he's supposed to do, represent the company, which is paying him. He's employed by maybe either directly by the company, or he works for an independent contractor, a company who is contracted by the gas company to go out there and get people to sign these extensions. So by telling the landowner all of the negative things about a given extension, is that something that's going to help facilitate or lead the landowner to sign? I don't think so. I think if I were a landman, which I will never, ever be, but if I were, but I won't be, but if I were, boy, it's even hard to do. But let's just say this. Don't put me in it. Let's say there's some other guy who becomes a landman. Well, if you're going out there to get somebody to sign documents, are you going to tell them every negative thing about the document? Are you going to tell them not even maybe never every negative thing, which, chances of happening are 1 in 20 million. But let's talk about the realistic negative things. Let's talk about how in Tioga County we see shale with these vertical wells holding 600, 700, 800, 1,000 acres, having them shut in. Let's talk about how that type of activity may affect you in the event that you sign a lease amendment or modification, or in the event you sign a 10-year lease with Shell, which also gives them this shut-in language. I mean, Shell, I would talk a little about Shell. I got some issues with what they're doing. I have a lot of issues with what they're doing, and as does Tioga County landowners. But if they're operating within the terms of the lease, well, I can have all the issues I want, but what am I going to be able to do about it? Well, if it's allowed under lease and there's nothing we can do about it, well, what do we do then? Well, we make sure that every darn new lease that we do, we address what is occurring to the landowner's benefit to try to prevent this in the future. And darn well, if we can't prevent it, if we can't address those issues, then I talk to my client, I talk to the landowner and say, hey, look, here's what's going on today. Here's what we're seeing. So fast forward 5 years, 10 years, what might you see in the future? You'll hear me say this often. There's not a perfect agreement. So what are we going to do? We're going to understand where the weaknesses are. We're going to look at what this offer is. And hey, if you're offered $1,000 per acre, 12.5%, 13, 14, and you're talking about a 10-year lease, and you're talking about deductions, and you're talking about long shut-in provisions. Well, you need to be careful. You need to you better know about this, because you could be signing up for a commitment of 15 years potentially and not even seeing any royalties. You may see nothing. So you need to know about those things. And so if the state minimum is 12.5 and you're being offered 13, well, percent, that is in royalties, doesn't get much worse. 14%, 12.5 is the state minimum, doesn't get much worse. So be careful. Want to stress, this is not specific advice for any individual. I have many clients, well, I don't have many right now, but I've had many offered this offer that I'm kind of just generically talking about here, and people who have this offer now that I've consulted with and we've talked with, and it's always your decision as a landowner. But the key is, the key, understand where your agreement's strong, understand where it's weak, understand what your benefits are going to be, and it's generally going to be current money for a bonus and potential for future money. But understand, where are weaknesses in this potential for future money? Are we talking about 15 years from now? Are we talking about 10 years, 12 years, 13? We need to discuss that. You need to understand, and then you need to weigh it in and say, okay, well, we look at what can I lose? Well, you can lose the bonus money. That's for certain. You could also lose royalty. The percentage could be dropped if there's a future offer. You could lose the offer entirely. But when we talk about percentages, if you're at 13% on an offer, well, the maximum, the offer can't get any worse than 12.5%. Likewise, if it's 14, you can only drop 1.5% down to 12.5%. So you need to be aware of those things and say, okay, one of the things I'll talk to clients about is cost benefit analysis. What is the cost of going forward and what's going to be the benefit? We talk also about this diminishing return. The more we're fighting, once we get an agreement, do we continue to fight, and what will be our return for that? So at some point at the beginning, the work is usually very fruitful because we're getting things in exchange. But as we go forward, we get to the point where you could work for 5 hours, but the return benefit as a result of that work is not going to be very significant. So at some point, the return for our effort starts to diminish. So we want to make sure that we're mindful of that. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, attorney Doug Clark, Clark Law Firm. And again, I represent landowners and only landowners and oil and gas right holders, but certainly not gas companies or pipeline companies. Do surface agreements, pad sites, more estate plannings. We're talking about gas lease modifications and amendments, certainly gas leases. One thing, I'll just real quick story. I just got, I've talked recently, you talk about gas prices. Oh boy. All right, I'm going to stay calm. We talk about gas prices and how companies now say, okay, well, the gas prices are real low, so we're going to give you this, real low offer. But yeah, that's true that gas prices are low. No doubt about that. It's also true that low gas prices are going to take a toll on a company's budget. They're not making as much money. They don't have as much money to spend, so it's going to take a toll on their budget. However, if the prices of gas go up, are they going to start? If the gas prices double, are they going to double your offer? Well, no, they're not going to do that. However, here's the thing. I've recently talked about in the last, I'll be conservative. I'd say about 6 months, 9 months, and I want to be conservative. We'll say within the last year, but it's shorter than that. I had the highest bonus offer that a client signed, and this was in the southwestern part of the state, that I've ever had on a per acre basis. The highest bonus offer on a per acre basis. So we're talking about, like when people got $500 an acre, $1,000, $5,000, $6,000. I'm limited in what I could say, but I could say this: it was the highest bonus offer that I've ever had. Anybody, actually, I think bonus highest offer, but also certainly in doing hundreds of leases, it was the highest per acre bonus that I've ever done. On top of that, just this week, southwestern Pennsylvania, we eclipsed it. The offer is higher than the one that I've done in the last year. So in other words, what I'm saying is that this is the new highest offer since 2007 that I've ever seen. The highest offer per acre bonus that I, Doug Clark, have ever seen. So what does that tell us? Well, this company obviously believes the gas prices are going to improve because they're putting out a pretty darn high, well, the highest I've seen. Likewise, not likewise, what am I saying? Totally to the contrary, you have Shell up in Tioga County, again, not specific advice for anyone, but up there bragging, and understandably so, about the G well, the Neil well, about these great productive wells. But, landowner, we're going to give you 12.5%, and we need a 10-year lease. Or we're going to give you 13%. Oh, wait, no, we may have a fire sale. We may give you a little bit higher percent, but still not 15. So we're talking about, the market's down, but it's not down so much that I didn't just receive this week the highest offer that I ever had any client ever being offered on a per acre basis. So, yeah, prices are down, but they will come up. So think about that. You're out there, you're considering an offer. However, I can't stress enough, this segment in the show is never specific advice for anybody. You need to talk to somebody. I'll say you can always contact the office here, 570-307-0702, 570-307-0702. But if it's not me, make it somebody. Okay, I you probably get tired of hearing me say this. I'm up against the break. But I always am. I'm always up against it. All right. Well, listen, I will be right back after this break here every Sunday from 8 to 9 on these stations. And again, I'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. It jumped out of my intro a little bit, so I'm going to go back and just remind everybody, if you do need representation, I represent landowners, oil, gas rights owners all across Pennsylvania. The offer I'm talking about was just one of the, not one of, but was the highest per acre bonus offer that I've ever had in representing literally hundreds of people for gas leases, hundreds and hundreds. Was in southwestern Pennsylvania. So the individual probably is 5 to 6 hours away from my office, and things are going quite well. So distance has never been an issue. I talk about I had a client, in London, in Canada, Alaska, Hawaii, Micronesia. So with today's technology, even if you're not, and actually the individual who I'm representing is, let's just say, not a very technologically savvy individual, but we've been able to work around everything, and it's worked very well. So I just want to encourage people. Sometimes people think, well, he's pretty far away. We really haven't had that to be a problem. And if it is a problem, we'll address it. But it really hasn't been a problem. So don't be afraid. You can contact us anytime, 570-307-0702. Also, check out pagasleaseattorney.com. Check out pipelineattorney.com. If you missed today's show, you miss any of the shows, you can go back, pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. I've been doing a show since August of 2010, so we are over 5 years. We're well over 5 years at this point. We don't archive all of the prior shows because some of the information gets to be stale after a while, because this is always evolving. It is always changing. So I don't want people to be listening things from 2010, applying them to today's market. That's the thing too. We talk about the shows only just general information, not specific legal advice, because things can change within the next few weeks. Things change all the time. So we need to be aware that this is constantly evolving. And listen, if you're looking at message boards, you're reading information out there in the internet, you have to understand that can be stale information. That information can be outdated. We need you to be thinking about the relevant information today, the important information today, educated with today's circumstances. And that can bad information cuts a lot of different ways. It can cut to where you enter into a bad deal because you are listening to bad information or getting bad information or old information. But the reverse can happen. You can have an opportunity for a deal or an agreement that you might want to do. You overplay your hand because you think you have more leverage based upon bad or stale information, and you end up bypassing. This agreement goes on, and maybe you really wish it didn't. So you could be sitting in a position where you overplay your hand, and maybe you have an offer for significant money, but you think you can get more, and you misjudge your situation because of bad information or lack of experience in this regard. And what happens is the offer ends up disappearing, and you say, well, geez, can I get that last offer back? And the company says, no, we moved on. So there's a lot involved in that. And you can't get that through those intricate details about your individual situation. You're not going to get that through a radio show. You're not going to get that through reading the websites, frankly. You're only going to get that by direct representation, looking at your lease, looking at the offer, understanding the market in your region, understanding the market across Pennsylvania, weighing your options, weighing where you may have leverage, where we can tell you have leverage, where there's less leverage, really getting that picture for you, not your neighbor, not your next door neighbor, but for you and your situation. So I can't stress that enough. Again, so I want to be clear. Look, pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. Great landowner information. Very good. Go check it out. You're going to get a big picture. You're going to get some specific details, but it's not individual advice. But you will, in my opinion, of course, there are websites, but in my opinion, I think you're going to learn a lot from that, and it's going to be good educational information. But that alone isn't what you rely on. You're going to be better equipped. You're going to understand things more if you go to the websites, you learn, you listen to the radio shows. But still, it's not individual representation for you. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm, where I represent landowners and oil and gas right owners, not and will not represent gas or pipeline companies, nor will I represent mineral acquisition companies or companies seeking to purchase oil and gas rights from landowners. I will represent landowners in those transactions, but I will never represent gas or pipeline companies. So, I want to touch on before, and I'm going to talk some about gas rights here in a minute, but before I do, I want to go back and say and stress this. I touched on it where every single person, every single individual is in a unique position. You're in a unique position because your gas lease may not be identical. In most cases, it's not identical to your neighbor or other people in your area. But in many times, I'll say many times it may be because you were part of a group or you signed around the same time frame. So you do have an identical or very similar lease. So most times that's not the case. However, there are many landowners who have the identical lease to what their what their neighbor has. However, that's not the end of it. Even if you have the identical situation, then you have to look at, and my point here of this is whatever is right for your neighbor doesn't mean it's right for you. And so you got to look at your lease. You got to look at your property. In most cases, your neighbor doesn't have the exact identical acreage of you. You do. So maybe you have 10 and they have 100. Maybe they have 100. Maybe you have 20. Any combination that there is. Also, maybe the activity has impacted your property different than the neighbor, meaning maybe there's a well that's drilled under you and not your neighbor, and now the company wants a modification and extension. Maybe you have better pipeline language in your agreement. Maybe you signed with a different company and all the different leases have now been transferred or assigned to a company that's going to develop in your area, but you have significantly different lease language. Oh, and by the way, maybe that you don't have the same identical job and family that your neighbor has, meaning that you may be married with 2 children who are 16, 17 years old, about to go to college. You're saying, well, geez, these college tuition looks pretty expensive. What am I going to do about it? And you may have an opportunity where you may have an ability to enter into an agreement to get some money and say, well, you know what? I may be more inclined to do this because this is going to help me and assist me with some much needed financial compensation and money to, say, pay for my kids to go to college or to assist in paying for them to go to college. It's pretty expensive. So as I know, I have a senior in high school and one who's a junior in college. So I know these things. So I understand that. Now, your neighbor, he or she, maybe it's a married couple in their 70s who have just retired. Maybe they're in their 60s and want to retire. Maybe they're in their 80s, or maybe they're in their 30s. Any possible combination. So, your income stream is not going to be the same. Your family dynamic is not going to be the same. Your lease document, in most cases, isn't going to be the same. Your desire and concern, your desire to protect your land, your concern about the company's activity on the land may be significantly higher or greater or much lower than what your neighbors. You'll hear me say, I've had clients that say, hey, look, drill in my living room, put the pipeline through my kitchen. Most people don't say that I speak to, but some people do. Well, those people that say that, they just sign documents. People that care more, who have a greater interest in saying, hey, look, I don't want to be ran all over here. I don't want to have the company put above ground facilities, a well pad, tanks, ponds, pits, whatever the case may be, pools, roads through my property if I can avoid it. Well, let's talk about that. Can you avoid it? So what your neighbor does, What your neighbor does should, in my mind, have no influence on what you're doing, unless, of course, somehow you're working together. Again, it's a whole other situation. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus here every Sunday on these stations from 8 to 9 a.m. And yes, I only represent landowners and oil and gas right owners in Pennsylvania, or who have the property in Pennsylvania. I have clients all across, and have had clients all across the country, and even in other countries as well. So my point here again is, you as a landowner, do not be influenced. My opinion, do not be influenced by what your neighbor did. Your neighbor signs the worst agreement on the planet Earth. Does that mean you should too? Well, if your neighbor signs the best agreement, but he signed or she signed it 3, 4, 5 years ago, are you able to get that same agreement from the company? No, most likely not, because there are a lot of circumstances have changed since then. So the point is, every individual needs and should have the best agreement available that they could receive at the time they enter into the agreement. And what does that mean? It means knowledge, education, and understanding what is being offered. Why is this being offered? What is negotiable? And if compensation isn't negotiable, terms and language virtually always is. So we see it. I see it all the time, where had you had limitations previously in your gas lease, pipeline agreement, even roadway agreement, surface use agreement, well, in the future, you could say no to a certain activity, or you could negotiate and get additional money. I mean, I've seen landowners many times, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the future because of the language that they negotiated originally, or their attorney negotiated, whatever the case may be. That happens all the time. Think about with just the gas leases, terminology in there, restricting pipelines, restricting deductions, what can be taken, what can be deducted, all of those things. You need, in every single case, to maximize the offer that's being presented to you. You need to, again, know where it's weak, know where it's strong, and the landman is not going to tell you, here it is. Why? Because the landman works for the company, not for you. Not a big commercial on lawyers, but the reality is you're talking about major industrial contracts that can last for 50, 100 or more years, and many times can be negotiated to increase compensation, and virtually always can be negotiated to increase the protections for you, your property, liability issues, future issues, to preserve and to maintain rights and ability to negotiate for higher compensation in the future. All of these things must be addressed. And what can't be addressed before you sign that paper, you need to know where's it weak, where's it strong. Get the best agreement for you. Your neighbor signs a bad deal, doesn't mean you have to. Your neighbor signs a bad deal does not mean you have to. Get the advice for your specific situation. Your situation is never going to be identical to your neighbor's situation. So we shouldn't be using them as our starting point, or even most cases reference point for what you're doing. You're your own person. Your property's your property. Your documents may be totally different. You need to understand your situation, and that's how you'll do the best that you can for you, your family, and future generations. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday, 8 to 9 on these stations. You can check the show. If you miss any of today's show, you want to go back, listen to other shows, pagasleaseattorney.com. We'll have this show up and archived tomorrow morning. Look, you can go today, go after the show, go to pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. We're getting in the winter. It's going to be cold. Everyone's going to be holed up inside. We got hours and hours and hours of all things Marcellus. check it out. I had a gentleman, very nice gentleman, came up to me recently at a seminar, said, hey, I've listened to a named Bob. Hi, Bob. And he says, I've listened to about 75% of your shows. All I can say is Bob really seemed like he knew what he was talking about. He's informed, he's educated, and he's going to make good decisions. You don't have to listen to 75% of the shows because we got hundreds of hours of shows, literally 200 plus hours of shows, but we don't have them all archived and available now. But that is going to make you informed. So, Bob, I appreciate you listening. And everybody else, again, pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. I'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I'm here every Sunday from 8 to 9 a.m. on these stations. And, I was talking about pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com. Really encourage everybody, go check it out. Check out the radio shows, check out the information. It's pretty much something there for everybody. Also, we get a lot of questions, topics. You can email me through pagasleaseattorney.com. You want a topic for the show? It's like, say, hey, I'm in Tioga County dealing with the shell situation. Can you talk about this? Hey, I'm in Susquehanna County. I'm dealing with the transmission line. Can you talk about this? Anything like that. Feel free. I'll put it on my list. I tell you, I'm sitting here with my list literally in front of me. Many topics and subjects for future shows, but I welcome them. Send them out here, and I will definitely look to get it addressed and try to get some good general information and education out there for everybody. So you can do that at pagasleaseattorney.com. We also get a lot of people who send emails to pagasleaseattorney.com to inquire about representation. Really encourage you to do that as well. As I say, look, this is my job. This is what I do. I represent landowners. So yes, love to hear from you. Love to have the opportunity to talk to see, talk to the office, see, hey, are we a good fit? Can we help you out? Is this something we can help you with? So you can contact us at 570-307-0702 or go to pagasleaseattorney.com, pipelineattorney.com, mail in your question. If it's regarding representation, we'll get back in touch with you and we'll see, hey, can we help you out? And hopefully we can, and we can work together and hopefully do good things for you. So with that, I'm going to turn the page a little bit. I mentioned earlier about people who are going to sell their oil and gas rights. Very, very important. If you're considering doing that, you need to get representation. And I'm going to commercial alert here, but I believe this. I believe this wholeheartedly and entirely. If you are seriously considering selling all or any of your oil and gas rights, call my office. Again, forgive me, but I'm going to do it again. If you are seriously considering selling oil and gas rights, any or all of them, call my office, 570-307-0702. I'm going to say it again, 570-307-0702. Why am I doing this? I try not to do this too much, but here's the deal. Three times within the last 2 weeks, I've been contacted with what I consider significant problems that landowners have who have sold or have been involved in these oil and gas transactions, either as a direct party or as a part owner of the oil and gas rights, where it's been a disaster. It's a bad situation. And the reason why it is because people handling this before did a bad job. The documents don't say what they're supposed to say to meet what the parties wanted to do. What do I mean by that? This is so elementary, but it's happened multiple times. I've talked to multiple people who say, yes, we were going to purchase. Here's a better example. We were going to purchase oil and gas rights for this property when we bought this property, or we were just purchasing oil and gas rights. And what happens is the documents don't say that. The deed doesn't say that. It says that these people were entitled to get gas royalties from an existing lease, or they received a lease, but not the oil and gas rights permanently. So If you're buying something, you better darn well be sure that when you pay that money that you're getting in return what you thought you were buying. And too many times that's not happening. It's not happening. Some of these things that I read, I'm just amazed. I'm amazed. I can't believe that these transactions were handled this way. Think about this. These can be, sometimes they're multi-million-dollar transactions, and I've seen them done wrong, just wrong, which just boggles my mind. I just can't believe it. So that's why I say we need to talk. We need to talk because maybe you think you're only assigning a certain portion of your lease rights, but actually you're selling everything. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know what you're doing. And you cannot rely. Okay, I'm going to stay calm. You can't rely on the other side of a transaction to represent your interests. So if you get a postcard, you get a letter in the mail, you get all these letters, you get these postcards wanting to buy your oil and gas rights, do you think that the people soliciting you to buy your oil and gas rights are the ones who are going to protect you? Do you think that they're your friend? They're going to protect you? No, I'll clue you in. No, that's not the situation. They want to buy the gas rights at the lowest possible price. Why wouldn't they? Who wants to overpay? Who wants to pay more than what they have to pay? They want to pay the lowest possible price. As elementary as it gets. They want to pay the lowest possible price, and they want loopholes to be able to withdraw from the transaction, many times to delay the transaction to see how production occurs. Other loopholes where you're offering indemnification to them, maybe you're warranting things that you shouldn't be warranting. You can't rely on the other side of this substantial transaction to represent your interests. If you are seriously considering selling your oil and gas rights, call me 570-307-0702. We'll do an initial review and consultation. I'll consult with you. I'll explain what the issues are. Send me the documents. I review them. We talk. I explain. Hey, look, here's where your problems are here. Here's where you need things to get taken care of. Hey, you need to talk maybe to your bank to find out if you have a mortgage on your property, can you do this? Will the money that they're promising to pay you, is that going to go directly? You're never going to see a dime possibly. Is that going to go directly to the bank to pay the mortgage? You need to be careful. Other side isn't going to tell you these things. They want your name on paper, and then they don't care if you're going to get in trouble with your mortgage company. Why would they? They have rights where they can pay off the mortgage, use your money to pay the mortgage, and then take money from you, or to use that money as credit. So if if you had an $80,000 mortgage and the company was going to give you $100,000 for selling the gas rights, well, check out that agreement, because virtually all of them say that company can give your bank $80,000 and then you'd get what's left over. So you have to understand, that's just one example. Also, watch out, because you have that property that's collateral for your mortgage. Is the bank going to have an issue if you sell? Think about it. If you sold your property, aren't you going to have to deal with the bank? Well, if you sell the oil and gas rights, do you think you may have to deal with your bank? Again, not individual advice for anyone, but we need to look at that. Those are just part of things. Only part of, see, I'm getting fired up and smacking the microphone. Only part of things, okay? We need to look at everything. I'm looking back. And what do I see? Look, everyone I do the best we can. And, thankfully we haven't had any issues yet. And we're going to be very careful to avoid any type of issues or problems in the future with every transaction. But what do I see? I see where landowners are selling oil and gas rights or entering into these contracts. And maybe they're thinking, oh yeah, we don't need a lawyer. This company's going to do it. Again, to me, that's certainly not the way that you need to be thinking. Saying, okay, I want to save some money, we'll let the company draw up the documents. Well, how are they going to draw up these documents? I'm amazed. I'm seeing documents that have mistakes that are going to come back to bite people in the future at some point, in my opinion. I mean, it's amazing to me of some of these documents that I'm seeing and how they're written, and they don't do what the landowner thinks they do. And they're drafted just poorly. So what do we have here? We have a situation where, okay, you're trying to save money. Now there's a mistake. Well, not only can that cost you money because the agreement doesn't do what you want to do, you thought that you were getting, and there's a lot of different examples with this, whether you thought you were getting permanent oil and gas rights and you only got an assigned royalty, whether you were selling something and you sold more than what you thought you were just selling rights under this lease, but you sold your whole oil and gas ownership forever. All of these things. There's many, many different ways that you can have these mistakes. And here's what happens. If you're trying to avoid expenses. And here's the point too. This isn't something that's going to cost you $5,000. It's not like that. You need to make sure that you're protected. You need to make sure you're protected. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people out there that haven't been protected and are feeling the result of that, or will feel the result of that over time. So we want to make sure that you're not saying, okay, well, hey, yeah, I want to save a couple dollars, and it ends up costing you, tens of thousands potentially in the future. So it's not that it costs $1 million to protect yourself or thousands and thousands of dollars to protect yourself. You can protect yourself. The agreements say what they need to say. Also, by the way, you should be advised by an independent party about this transaction, and is this right for you? So I'm up against it again. All right, so listen, I'm going to talk more about this because it is important. I'm going to kind of regroup and get everything together. But if you are seriously considering selling your oil and gas rights, whether you call me 570-307-0702. We can do a review, consult. If you want additional help, we can go from there. Otherwise, we can be done at that point. But you need to know certain things. You need to look at that agreement of sale. You need to know your options. And I've said this before, every person that I've done this with, every person I've had this review and consult with has been very happy as a result of that. And they learn things and they understand. And a lot of times they make different decisions, or they change at least part of the decision because they didn't understand things. You must understand what you're doing if you're going to enter into these transactions, and you must be protected. Don't sign anything. Oh, here I go. I sound like a lawyer. Don't sign anything. Call me, but it's true. And if you don't call me, call someone else who knows what they're doing. The company is not there to help you. They're there to help themselves. It's not a secret. It's not a secret. Know it and protect yourself. I'm Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm here every Sunday, 8 to 9 a.m. on these stations. I'm going to be back after this break. Welcome back to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm, where I represent landowners and oil and gas right owners, and will not represent gas or pipeline companies. So, okay. I want to circle back again. Selling your oil and gas rights, and I'm sorry about the commercial aspect of this, but unfortunately, I think it has to be done. Unfortunately, I guess for you as the listener. But if you are seriously considering selling your oil and gas rights, call my office. Find out about the reviews and consults. We do those. It's not going to cost you a lot of money, and it's going to be very valuable for you. You can contact the office, 570-307-0702. You can also go to pagasleaseattorney.com. Read up on it there. I've done other shows about selling in oil and gas rights. So you can get good general information, but we need to dig deep into your potential transaction to really understand it. Many times people have offers and we're able to put them in touch with, and I'm not a broker by any means, but if you're seriously going to do this, well, first off, you need to make sure you understand exactly what you're doing and that it's right for you. But then also you want to make sure you're getting the most amount of money. So what we have here is you have a lot of different companies out there trying to make these purchases. So you want to make sure that if you're going to take an offer, that there may not be better offers out there. So as a general rule, I'm not crazy about any of this. However, you need to be protected, and if it is right for you, and at times it is right for people, not most of the time in my opinion, but at times it is right, we need to make sure you're getting the most money you can. So if there's a company in the area that we know about that may be offering $1,000 more an acre, or even $2,000, whatever the case may be, you don't want to just take the first offer you get in case there's better offers out there. But before you do any of it, you need to understand, is this something you even want to explore? Now, I was talking before, if you're going to do anything with these transactions, and even if you're selling property, you need to know, and you need to have this transaction documented correctly. With the oil and gas rights, these stakes have been raised in many areas. So what's happening is deeds aren't saying what they need to say. People are making mistakes. Lawyers are making mistakes, and deeds aren't saying what they're supposed to say. Sales agreements aren't saying what you think they should say, meaning an agreement that you enter into to sell your property, you better darn well make sure that that says what it's supposed to say. And if you're relying on the company to tell you that, well, remember, they're the ones engaged in this transaction. I talk to too many people that say, oh yeah, I'm only selling the oil and gas rights under this existing lease, and we get the documents, and that's not what it says. And again, that's one example. I could go on and on. These documents don't always say what the landowner thinks they say. And the landowner doesn't understand the overall impact. How does this work in the future? Okay, you're in a transaction here. It's adversarial in a sense where the company wants to pay you the least amount of money they can. They want to get as many rights as they can. You want to get the most amount of money that you can. You also want to preserve whatever possible rights you can. There are so many things that you can do with these transactions. If you're going to sell the oil and gas rights, you could sell the Marcellus rights, but not use Utica. You could sell Utica, not Marcellus. You could do all kinds of things. If you own 100 acres, you could sell 1 acre up to 100 acres, and anywhere in between. You can do all kinds of things. You need to understand what's right for you. And then if you're going to do it, you better be sure it's saying the documents reflect what you understand as being the agreement. And who are you going to rely on? The company landman, the company representative, the person who's working for the company, a broker whose idea is, let me get this thing done so I can get my commission? Think about that. These are big time transactions. And I don't care if you have 5 acres and you're selling those. Well, you know what? They're the only 5 acres you have, if that's the case. So you need to protect yourself. I am Attorney Doug Clark. You're listening to All Things Marcellus. I'm talking about selling your oil and gas rights. It's going to keep going. It's keep happening. And people are entering into bad agreements. I had guys come say like, whoa, I thought this is what I did. And now they're saying something different. We review the documents to say, unfortunately, the documents don't say what you think they should say. They say something different. Who did this? Well, the company drafted it up. Or I didn't want to spend a lot of money, so I let the other company do it, or the company do it. Also, I wanted to just do it on the cheap. Well, you know what happens is when you do something cheaply, and when I say cheap, I mean you say I don't want to spend any money. You do something cheap, then often you get what you pay for, and you have a problem later on. And also, what happens sometimes too is you say, okay, well, I had an attorney. Well, your attorney wasn't experienced, and your attorney made mistakes and didn't document it the way it was supposed to be done. Or you called around and you found whoever was the cheapest attorney and you hired that person. Well, there may be a reason why they were the cheapest attorney. Maybe they don't do a good job. Maybe they just throw things together and they don't have the experience in this area. So think about this. If you as a landowner engaging in this major transaction to sell these oil and gas rights permanently or even under the existing lease, and there's so many things to talk about here, but if you're going to do that, well, if you're trying to do it on the cheap, you're going to potentially run into mistakes, and they can be big time mistakes. They could be big time mistakes that cost you tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars. They could be big time mistakes that end up you gave away, or not gave away, but you sold your entire rights that you didn't think you were doing. So there can be those type of mistakes which you can't correct, or there can be mistakes that the documents just were a mess and weren't done right, and now you need to correct those. So now you got to go back and you got to spend more money. So be careful. So being cheap, and I don't like to say like, gee, oh my heavens, this guy must be super expensive. That's not what we're saying here. We're saying that if you're just trying to save money and say, I don't want to spend any money, or I'm going to call around and I find the cheapest person I can possibly find, you got to be careful, because you want to go cheap, you can run into mistakes. Then you find somebody who's inexperienced. Well, inexperience can lead to mistakes. So now you want to go cheap, and you go cheap and you go with someone inexperienced. That's a deadly combination potentially, because maybe you save some money by hiring somebody that's never done this before or has no experience in doing this. And then you have a problem later, and now you have a nightmare on your hands. So again, I'm not saying you got to go out and spend thousands upon thousands of dollars by any means. What I am saying, though, is, I do these review and consultations. This isn't about, okay, call me, hire me. I'm trying to explain to you this process. So I do these reviews and consultations where the landowner sends me the offer. We talk about it. I've dealt with many of these companies, and we talk about the offer. We talk about the issues. We talk about your options. We talk about, if you want to do this, how do you address this? Make sure that you're aware of all these different potential problems, and we address them. Now, if you want to go ahead forward and you want to do sign the company's documents, hey, you're done. We had our review and consultation. You understand everything, and you may elect to do that. Generally, that doesn't occur. But you can say, okay, I want to do it. You can say, hey, look, I'm no longer even interested. I didn't realize all of these things. Or you can say, hey, one thing is we have people who do elect to move forward, and we make sure that those documents reflect what we need them to reflect. And we do it in a cost-effective, efficient manner. But I want you to sleep soundly knowing that the documents reflect what you think they should say, or what you understood, or what you thought they were going to say. And too many times that's not the case. So we're seeing people who think, and sometimes it's trust misplaced, especially if you're doing it with the company you're negotiating with. But we need to make sure, number one, the great thing about these review and consults, and again, I am sorry, and you're probably tired of hearing me saying this about the commercial aspect, but I've been doing these review and consults for people selling the oil and gas rights. The reason why I'm promoting it like this is because I know that they're beneficial for people. I know people are signing bad deals and people are being taken advantage of. I know that people are entering into transactions to sell oil and gas rights, not understanding that they had all kinds of other options. So I want you to be aware of the options. I want you to understand where there are problems in the agreement. And I want you, if you're going to go ahead and do the agreement, that you're fully informed and educated. So you can call me, 570-307-0702. Check out PAGasLeaseAttorney.com. You need representation. Get it early, even if it's just a review and consult, so you understand. You're listening to All Things Marcellus with me, Attorney Doug Clark of the Clark Law Firm. I will be back next Sunday on these stations from 8 to 9 a.m. Have a great week, everyone.